Rugby World Rankings for the 6th of September 2021. There's a little bit in the way of movement, especially some of the teams past the 16th spot, which is all I can fit on the whiteboard. But yeah, we'll go over some of the world rankings, where things are at, why teams are in the spots they're in, and also look at some of the upcoming international fixtures and the potential movements in the rankings. The rankings themselves are always one which... Again, like a lot of things, they kind of divide opinion. Some people think they're pretty fair. Some people think, they're kind of way off the money. Other people just couldn't care less about them. Kind of who cares about who's number one or number two in the world? They'd rather look at their trophy cabinet or something like that. But yeah, either way, we'll go through the rankings with the most recent round of kind of international games. I haven't done a couple of weeks, so we'll look at those kind of permutations and you guys can let me know your thoughts. We've been saying it for a long time, and it continues to be the case. South Africa is still number one. They didn't take any points off Argentina with their Rugby Championship most recent win, because the gap in points, 82.86, 94.49, and it was a home game for South Africa, so they didn't take any points. So South Africa didn't get any higher by playing a team based on the rankings, which is so far below them. New Zealand is there at number two. New Zealand did take points off Australia. So New Zealand, they're still pretty far behind, 94.49, 90.31. What it does mean, though, is New Zealand's no longer in the 80s. New Zealand has jumped up into the 90s on the points. So because it was an away win, it was worth a little bit more. 90.31 is the current ranking, up from 89.29. So what that has meant is that, obviously, because it's a points exchange, the Aussies have dropped a wee bit. Obviously, England, Ireland, and France, no changes for them. They haven't been playing. Sometimes they will move up and down if other teams around them move, but their points totals haven't changed. We won't see them in action until the kind of end-of-year tests. But Argentina is on the way up, despite losing. Argentina's in 6th. They keep swapping places with Australia. Yeah, they've kind of been swapping back and forth between 6th and 7th. There's not much in it. Argentina's 82.86. Australia's dropped from 83.14 to 82.11. So they've dropped down to 7th. It's hard on the Aussies because they've played New Zealand a lot, man. I don't want to compare Australia to what happens with Italy in the Six Nations. But when you constantly play teams above you, you need to get at least one win to kind of balance out the losses. And usually the Aussies would, usually it kind of goes 2-1 or something like that. It's very rarely a clean sweep, but in 2021, it has been a clean sweep by the All Blacks of the Wallabies. So that hasn't done their world rankings any favours. Scotland is still 8. Wales is still 9. I know the Welsh ranking kind of grinds some people's gears because you look, man, we're Six Nations champions. How the heck can we be so low? It basically just goes back to 2020 was a really bad year for Wales. So they plummeted in the rankings, and then they were edging their way back up. Like I think by March, in the Six Nations, like Wales were, I think, around about 6th on 83 points. So by current standards, they'd be about where France are. But then they lost. They drew and lost to Argentina at home. So World Rankings doesn't care if you were playing a weakened team without your British and Irish Lions. They then drop down the rankings. They're not that far away. 80.59. You're one decent win over like an England or a New Zealand from being up to 83. So maybe 82 point something. So yeah, it's not a heck of a gap in terms of the points, although it does feel wrong that a team is 9th when they've got a Six Nations trophy in the cabinet. But again, take the trophy. Japan, Fiji, Georgia, Samoa, Italy, Tonga, and Uruguay. Man, haven't seen these guys for a long time, at least on my whiteboard. Here they are in 16th spot. They benefit from the fact that the USA lost to Canada for the first time in a very long time. Canada were ranked kind of significantly below the US. I think it was like 22nd against 16th. So there was enough world rankings spots. Remember, it's this number, the whatever number, which kind of counts in terms of the rankings between them. Like you could be 1st against 10th and still take points off them if it was relatively close on how many points they've actually got. But yeah, Canada, first victory over the US in ages. means the US drops to 17th. They would be the next team on the board. They're on 66.70 now, down from 68.1. So that sees them drop below Uruguay. And Canada has jumped up. They're also not on the board, but they've jumped up from 61.11 to 62.51. So they're up a spot above Hong Kong now, into 21st, below Spain, Portugal, and Romania. So, yeah, there's nothing much doing with these teams who haven't played. But hopefully we'll see, a fair bit of kind of shuffling around of teams come the end of year tests, when we'll see a whole bunch of teams in action. Like, it's always a bit weird when you're looking at the Six Nations or the Rugby Championship. This time added with the Canadian and US game in there as well, is that you got a bunch of teams not playing, but they can be kind of moving up and down. But for the most part, teams are pretty stable in this one. We do have some games this weekend. You got USA against Canada. It's kind of the rematch. This time it is on in the States. Honestly, that was a really hard game to find to watch. Not a hard game to watch in terms of the game. It was tight. It was played at a kind of small venue, and yeah, if you saw the game, you know what I'm talking about. Canada against USA. It was an interesting one. Just like the camera angles and stuff were a bit funny at times, but it was a really good crowd. But you won't find highlights of it seemingly anywhere. As I go into this video, you can't find highlights of it. You can't find replays of it. No broadcasters picked it up. Even dodgy streaming sites didn't seem to have it. There's no torrents of it. Like, if you want to find that game, it seems to be, it's very hard to find. Hopefully the rematch, USA against Canada in the USA this time, will be more marketed, but I don't think so. It's on the same two streaming services, and if you haven't got either of those, then you kind of up a creek without a paddle. So yeah, if the USA get a big win, they could go back up. If they lose, they could drop down, and that's just kind of the way it goes. So to be expected. New Zealand is playing Argentina. If they get a big win over Argentina, and South Africa by some miracle had a huge loss, New Zealand still wouldn't pip them for number one. So South Africa will still be number one no matter what happens in the first round of the Rugby Championship. Argentina, I think, could go up to like sixth. They are sixth, fifth if they win. Australia could go up to sixth if they get their results. I think even fifth or fourth if they get a really big result, but it just depends on what happens, because there's kind of two games running parallel. But I don't think, if South Africa win, they're only going to go up really marginally, because again, the gap between them and Australia is pretty high. They can't take many points off Australia, but they will increase their lead very, very slightly. But yeah, so those are the games on this weekend. Then you've got women's rugby coming up. You've got Scotland, Italy, Spain, and Ireland. And then following that, I think there's USA, New Zealand, USA, Ireland. There's like heaps of games. And there's like the end of year test, probably got Wales playing New Zealand. I think Scotland's playing Tonga. And man, there's heaps of games to come. Good times. Very good times. But yeah, those are the rankings for the moment. Like I mentioned, Canada and USA, despite their game not being seemingly available anywhere, have been on the move in terms of the rankings. Most of the teams are pretty stable. Australia and Argentina have swapped spots. Uruguay have appeared on the board for the first time in a long time, so any excuse to wear this jersey. But yeah, you guys let me know what you reckon. Do you think these rankings are somewhat fair, or do you think there's a few that could kind of use correction? I don't know. Anytime somebody in the comments of this video says, I reckon it'll be this, guarantee virtually nobody agrees, because that's just the way we are wired. Eh? We all kind of have our own thoughts and feelings on how the teams would match up. But anyway, you guys let me know your thoughts, and yeah, I'll talk to you guys again soon. Later.